Hi, my name is Faye. This is the second time I'm recording this video today, so if I'm a bit frustrated, that's why. I wanted to talk about the race riots in the UK, which is not a funny subject, so I'll stop laughing now, and Islamophobia in the UK. And before we get into anything on the UK, I just wanted to give a quick Bangladesh update because I've been covering the news over the last 2 or 3 weeks through July. So I just wanted to give a few updates before I get into what the news is saying. I just want to say to all of my Bangladeshi students out there who participated in those protests, I don't care if it's ruined my makeup. You guys are fantastic and I'm so proud of you. There isn't really words to capture how proud I am to be Bangladeshi. Like, the fact that it's also happened in my lifetime, I'm so proud of my country and I'm so proud of what you've been able to achieve, and I only hope the best for you. Please, please, everyone, if everyone could give a solemn congratulations to Bangladesh, they deserve it. So, quick summary from the BBC. I will link where I got the information to. All of the sources that I use will be linked in the description below under the sources section. So this and any other sources that I use in this video will be in that section. Also, all the sources that I used are generally accepted to be accredited and trusted sources from news media, press and stuff like that. So firstly, to summarise, Bangladeshis are waiting to see what unfolds a day after Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled the country. Parliament was dissolved on Tuesday, a key demand of student protest leaders who have also said they will not accept military-led government. Well done. The country's army chief has promised an interim government and said new elections will be announced. Huge crowds stormed Hasina's official residence in Dhaka on Monday, and there was looting and disorder in the capital, resulting in the deaths of more than 100 people, overtaking Sunday as the deadliest day of violence. Hasina is in India, but it is unclear where she might end up more permanently, hopefully on trial for war crimes. The student protest began in July with calls to abolish civil service job quotas, but spiraled into demands for Hasina to quit after 15 years in power. So at the moment, the situation is looking better than last month in Bangladesh. There have been many first-hand accounts of folks cleaning up the streets and protecting temples and minorities, and I've also seen a lot of propaganda being spread by the Modi government and other news like Indian news sources. From the first-hand accounts that I am more inclined to believe, because they're firstly first-hand accounts and they are from Bangladeshi sources. From what I have seen, I've seen Maulanas and Mullahs going out into the streets and protecting temples and their Hindu brothers and sisters, and I am very proud to see that, and I'm very happy to see that. Of course, it's uncertain if things will start to get better or if this is the calm before a storm, but I do hope that things brighten in Bangladesh. Our nation has faced so much hardship and so much bloodshed, and I think the Bangladeshi people deserve reprieve and they deserve our deepest respect. Well done. Well fucking done. On to the more aggravating topics of the day. Today, I want to talk about Islamophobia and the race riots that have been occurring over the last week and probably into this week and onwards. Let's start with a bit about what's been going on and then we'll come back to it at the end. So I've taken this article from the New York Times. They use the word soccer a lot. I'll be replacing that word with football because it's unnatural for me to call that soccer. I feel like this was one of the articles that really outlined a lot of this stuff for me, and yeah, let's get into it. So the article is titled "Who are the far-right groups behind the UK riots?" and the subheading says, "After a deadly stabbing at a children's event in northwestern England, an array of online influencers, anti-Muslim extremists and fascist groups have stoked unrest, experts say." This is an article by Esther Bintliff and Eve Sampson. Esther Bintliff reported this from London and Eve Sampson from New York. This was published on the 3rd of August 2024 and was updated on August 4th, 2024. Violent unrest erupted in several towns and cities in Britain in recent days, and further disorder broke out on Saturday as far-right agitators gathered in demonstrations around the country. Demonstrations is putting it lightly. No, that's a very light use of that word. Demonstrations, far-right agitators, say what they are. They're domestic terrorists. That's what they are. The violence has been driven by online disinformation and extremist right-wing groups intent on creating disorder after a deadly knife attack on a children's event in northwestern England, experts say. A range of far-right factions and individuals, including neo-Nazis, violent football fans, and anti-Muslim campaigners, have promoted and taken part in the unrest, which has also been stoked by online influencers. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has vowed to deploy additional police officers to crack down on the disorder. This is not a protest that has got out of hand, he said on Thursday. It is a group of individuals who are absolutely bent on violence. Keir's, the domestic terrorists call him that. Thanks. Here's what we know about the unrest and some of those involved. Where have the riots taken place? The first riot took place on Tuesday evening in Southport, a town in northwestern England, after a deadly stabbing attack the previous day at a children's dance and yoga class. 3 girls died of their injuries and 8 other children and 2 adults were wounded. The suspect, Axel Rudakubana, was born in Britain, but in the hours after the attack, disinformation about his identity, including the false claim that he was an undocumented migrant, spread rapidly online. Far-right activists used messaging apps, including Telegram and X, to urge, or Twitter. Don't give it validity by calling it X, it's Twitter, to urge people to take to the streets. Over 200 people descended on Southport on Tuesday night, many travelling by train from elsewhere in Britain, the police said, which kind of proves that this was organised. Even though it wasn't like formally organised on like a piece of paper between like a group chaired people, it was clearly organised because loads of people from other parts of Britain went to Southport to partake in this. Rioters attacked a mosque, wounded more than 50 police officers and set vehicles alight. On Wednesday night, another far-right demonstration brought clashes with the police in central London, leading to over 100 arrests. Smaller pockets of disorder broke out in Hartlepool in northeastern England, and in the city of Manchester, and in Aldershot, a town southeast of London. On Friday night, Northumbria Police said its officers had been subjected to serious violence as far-right demonstrators set fires and attacked officers in Sunderland, a city in the northeast. Saturday brought violent protests to cities including Hull, Leeds, Manchester, Nottingham and Stoke-on-Trent, as well as Belfast, Northern Ireland. In Liverpool, the police said more than 300 people have been involved in violent disorder on Saturday night, with businesses looted and 2 officers hospitalised. The chair of the National Police Chiefs Council, Gavin Stevens, told BBC Radio on Friday that extra officers would be on Britain's streets and that the police would use lessons learned from the 2011 London riots. We will have surge capacity in our intelligence, in our briefing, and in the resources that are out in local communities, he said. The organisation has said that nearly 4,000 additional officers have been deployed to deter the violence. So that's a tidy, if a little shifty description of what's been going on in the last week. Let's pause from the reading of this article for the moment and get into the topic of today's video, Islamophobia. We will return to the article, but in a little bit, because I want to talk about this term, defining it, and why it is a valid term. Now, to put in some disclaimers, there was a time in my past, and in fact this channel's history, where I didn't feel that Islamophobia was an appropriate term to be widely used. I felt like it was too loaded and it was just used as a gotcha for like preventing any criticism of Islam as a religion. I no longer believe that that's the case. I think that Islamophobia is a real thing, and I think that the word Islamophobia also is very apt for what it describes. And I'm going to try my level best to explain why I feel this way now as we go through all of this together. Let's start with defining Islamophobia. The definition that I'm using is from a paper published by the British House of Commons, again, linked in the description. In the foreword to the 2017 report, Baroness Worsey claimed that to challenge Islamophobia, the starting point must surely be a definition, a mechanism that leads to accountability. The report recommended that the government should adapt its updated definition of Islamophobia. The report provided both a short definition, Islamophobia is anti-Muslim racism, and a longer definition, Islamophobia is any distinction, exclusion, or restriction towards or preference against Muslims or those perceived to be Muslim that has the purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal footing of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, or any other field of public life. To summarize, Islamophobia is the negative perception of Muslims based on stereotypes or those perceived to be Muslim, and also an extremely negative perception of Islam as compared to other religions who have similar values and similar histories, like Christianity, for example. Just to sort of bring you up to speed, I already know what the first argument is going to be because I've heard it a lot. And the first argument to this, to the definition, just the definition of Islamophobia, is Islam is not a race, it's a religion. Yeah, thank you for telling me that. Someone who was a practicing Muslim and someone who grew up as Muslim. Thank you for telling me that Islam is a religion and not a race. Thank you. These are unnecessary semantics. Normal, everyday people don't need this spelling out for them, but since you want to lowball your own intelligence, let me spell it out for you. You can't be discriminatory against people for the simple fact that they believe and practice a different faith to you. Does that make sense? Mafhum? You do not know how individual Muslims practice Islam, and you do not get to cast judgment on the kind that they might practice because of your own perception that you probably made up in your head, let's be real. Additionally, if you have an exceptionally negative opinion of Islam, disproportionate to how you view other religions with similar values and a similar history like Christianity, yeah, motherfucker, you have a goddamn problem and I don't know how to help you. I don't think anyone is able to help you. Think what you want to think, your racist little thought inside, or maybe try to educate yourself and be better. Islamophobia is discrimination against people who are Muslim or perceived to be Muslim. This also includes a staggering prejudice towards the teachings of Islam. What do I mean by perceived to be Muslim? So within the bounds of the Muslim label, right? You have Sunni Muslims, you have Shia Muslims, you have Muslim minorities like Ahmadis, Quranis, like loads of different types of Muslims. Then you also have ex-Muslims or former Muslims who may not have, shed the Muslim title, still live and operate within the Muslim community, who appear as Muslims. Like when you see them, you think that they're Muslims. You also have apostates who still use their Muslim names, still fast during Ramadan, or, at least culturally take part in iftars and suhoors. You have people who take the day off for Eid, for example. You have people who you recognize them as Muslim because they behave in a Muslim way, whatever that might mean to you. I personally, I'm a murtad, alright? I'm an apostate. I left Islam. I understand wanting to leave Islam and wanting to criticize Islam and so on. I understand that in many parts of the world also that people aren't allowed to openly criticize Islam, and that's a valid argument for those parts of the world. Islam is an idea and all ideas deserve criticism. It's good for those ideas to be criticized. Additionally, several Islamic scholars, people who are heralded in Islam, have been imprisoned and punished under the guise of blasphemy laws because they had ideas about certain ideas within Islam. So it's the same old story. people fearing change and clinging to tradition. It's the same thing. I think this argument that Islam is not a race comes about because people go, oh, well, you can't choose your race, you can choose to be Muslim. Like, that's the main difference in all this, as if racism isn't still an integral part of Islamophobia. Yes, people can choose their faiths, unlike their race. They can't choose their race. People can choose their faiths, but people can't control how they're perceived. Perception is in the eye of the beholder, yes? You can't control how you are perceived, and if a racist far-right freak perceives you as a terrorist Muslim just because you have a beard and a turban, you have no fucking control over that, do you? That's why Islamophobic attacks can affect more than just Muslims. It can affect anyone that's perceived to be Muslim. And you know how racist people are. They're racist. They're not going to ask you if you're Muslim or not before they hate crime you. They came out to hate crime somebody, and you fit the bill. There's a few papers that I would like to quote here. If you wanted to have a look at these papers, they're really, really good. I would highly recommend that you read them in full when you have the time, but for now I will be reading them directly off the paper from the excerpts that I've collected, and hopefully they shed some insight into what I'm trying to say. So this is from a paper called Encountering Misrecognition and Being Mistaken for Being Muslim. So in their abstract, in the first part of their paper, they've said this: our analysis points to a dynamic set of interconnected issues shaping young people's experiences of misrecognition across a range of mediatized, geopoliticized and educational spaces, geopolitical events and their representation in media, the homogenization of the South Asian community and the lack of visibility offered to non-Muslims, non-Muslim ethnic and religious minority groups all worked to construct our participants as Muslims. Young people demonstrated agency and creativity in handling and responding to these encounters, including using humor, clarifying their religious affiliation, social withdrawal, and ignoring the situation. Redressing misrecognition requires institutional change to ensure parity of participation in society. This is another part of it. Surprisingly, little has been said about encounters that involve misrecognition or misidentification, although a small group of scholars provide conceptual insights about the nature, form, and meaning of misrecognition. Most notably, Taylor in 1994 noted that in encountering misrecognition, a person or group of people can suffer real damage, real distortion, if the people or society mirror back to them a confining or demeaning or contemptible picture of themselves. Non-recognition or misrecognition can inflict harm, can be a form of oppression, imprisoning someone in a false, distorted, and reduced mode of being. Moreover, to encounter misrecognition is not simply to be thought ill of, looked down upon, or devalued by others' attitudes, beliefs, or representations. Rather, it is to be denied the status of a full partner in social interactions as a consequence of institutionalized patterns of cultural value that constitute one as comparatively unworthy of respect or esteem. Going further, Taylor suggested that misrecognition shows not just a lack of respect, it can inflict a grievous wound, saddling its victims with a crippling self-hatred. Alongside this clustering of work about class and gendered misrecognitions, there is also small but growing scholarship around people's experiences of being misrecognized as Muslim. Puar, in 2007, referred to the prolific creativity involved when people are attacked as a result of being mistaken for being Muslim. Puar writes in his 2007 paper, "Let us ponder for a moment this span of violence. verbal harassment, being called Bin Laden or son of Bin Laden, Osama, especially on the phone, while driving, tailgating, hate mail, defecating and urinating on Sikh gurdwaras, Islamic mosques and Hindu temples, leading in some cases to arson, blocking the entrance of a Sikh temple in Sacramento with a tractor and truck, and jumping into the sacred holy water at the temple, throwing bricks, gasoline bombs, garbage and other projectiles into the homes of Sikhs and Arabs, and slashing car tires, death threats and bomb threats, fatal shootings of taxi drivers, the majority of whom have been turbaned Sikhs, verbal and physical harassment of primary and secondary school children, as well as foreign students on college campuses, and attacks with baseball bats, paintball guns, lit cigarettes, and pig's blood. In a different article released by The Conversation titled "You Look All the Same, Non-Muslim Men Targeted in Islamophobic Hate Crime Because of Their Appearance," the report stated that the consequences of hate crime are widespread. While Muslims in Britain are increasingly subject to Islamophobia, some non-Muslims are also being targeted because they are perceived to be Muslim. In new research presented to the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims, we looked at the experiences of non-Muslim men who reported being the target of Islamophobic hate crime. We interviewed 20 non-Muslim men of different ages, race and religion based in the UK. Our group included Sikhs, Christians, Hindus and atheists. Although their experiences were all different, they believed that their skin color, their beard or turban meant that they were perceived to be Muslim and targeted for it. We decided to only interview men in this study because we understand from our community work that men are more likely than women to be victims of Islamophobia due to a mistaken identity. Vinesh, a 32-year-old Indian British Hindu, told us, "People have been calling me names on Twitter like you're a 4-letter P word, cunt. I have also been threatened on Facebook, like today is the day we get rid of the likes of you. I feared for my safety when I read things like this." In some cases, hate crimes are targeted at people's homes or workplaces, with property damage, with Islamophobic graffiti because the perpetrators believe the victims are Muslim. In a recent case in Liverpool, Allah Akbar was painted on a Hindu family's future home. One 37-year-old man called Paul, a British white atheist who is perceived to be a convert to Islam due to his beard, told us he had been targeted. "I live in a rough estate. I had dog excrement shoved through the mailbox. They also threw paint over my door." There are other articles that I will just read the titles of, and I'll link in the description below for you to read at your own leisure. Indian mistaken for Muslim attacked in US bar. Buddhist monk mistaken for Muslim attacked in US. We are accused of being ISIS terrorists. The experiences of non-Muslim men who suffer Islamophobia because they look Muslim. Just to clarify, Islamophobia isn't a thing because it also affects non-Muslims. It's a thing because it exists and it occurs and it happens to people. I've only used these examples because I know that there are very loud dissenters in the background who love the idea of free speech so long as it allows them to scream slurs and be racist, but will at the same time police the way that we use language to describe how we have been affected by what they have been saying. Shut up. Nobody cares. You're racist. Your opinion doesn't matter. You shouldn't be entitled to free speech, actually. That's my opinion. You shouldn't be able to just be racist to anyone because you fucking feel like it. Keep your perceptions to yourself. In here, as I said. Or be better. Those are your two options. But let's jump back to the New York Times article and finish reading that article, actually. Because we have some sections to cover now that we've covered Islamophobia as a topic. So, which groups are behind the unrest, the race riots? Several far-right groups have been at the riots or promoted them on social media. David Miles, a prominent member of Patriotic Alternative, a fascist group, shared photographs of himself in Southport, according to Hope Not Hate, a Britain-based advocacy group that researches extremist organisations. Other far-right agitators spread misinformation about the protest on social media, including British Movement, a neo-Nazi group. Images of the protests examined by Hope Not Hate showed some people with Nazi tattoos. After the disorder in Southport, the police said that the supporters of the English Defence League had been involved. The riots have also attracted people linked to football violence or hooliganism, which has long overlapped with nationalist movements in Britain. Officials noted that not everyone at the demonstrations had far-right views. Why? That's a given. We know that. Why does that need to be stated? Especially when you cover other protests like the BLM protests and the pro-Palestinian protests and constantly say that they're violent, anti-Semitic, or they just want trouble all the time. Why do you need to qualify that in these far-right riots, not everyone holds far-right views? I don't know why it needs to be said. Why? I don't get it. Anyway, David Hanson, a cabinet minister, told LBC Radio on Friday some might be caught up in the summer madness. Some might be people who've got genuine concerns. Yeah, I'm sure looting from fucking Lush, those guys definitely have genuine concerns. But he warned, if you are organising this now, we will be watching you. I'm just going to move on to the next part. I was so fucking infuriating. What is the English Defence League? Created in 2009, the English Defence League was a far-right street movement notorious for violent protests and an anti-Islam, anti-immigration stance. The group emerged in Luton, England, where community tensions had risen after a handful of Islamic extremists chanted abuse at British soldiers returning home from Iraq. Luton was already associated with Islamist extremism because it was home to a small number of adherents to Al-Muhajirun, an extremist group implicated in the 2005 London bombings. Among the English Defence League founders was Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who also goes by the name Tommy Robinson. We're going to call him Mr. Yaxley Lennon because that's his name, his middle-class fucking name. He only uses the name Tommy Robinson to appear working class. He's not. He's a middle-class fuck. Born in Luton, he was at one time a member of the far-right British National Party, or BNP. He also had connections to football violence and was convicted of leading football fans in a brawl in Luton in 2010. In the group's early years, regional divisions carried out local demonstrations, including protests over planned mosques, and engaged in attacks like placing pig heads around Muslim sites. According to Matthew Feldman, a specialist on right-wing extremism, the group represented a new stage in far-right British politics because, unlike the National Front or the British National Party, it did not contest elections. This is direct action politics, disseminated and coordinated via the new media, ranging from Facebook to mobile phones and digital film to YouTube, Professor Feldman wrote in a 2011 academic study of the English Defence League. In 2013, Mr. Yaxley Lennon, or Tommy Robinson, said he had broken ties with the League. And after leadership disputes and internal divisions, the group no longer formally exists, but experts say that many of its supporters remain active through other nationalist groups with similar aims and tactics. It should also be said that the EDL was part founded by Tommy Robinson, or Stephen over here. I don't even know what this is. To be honest, I always thought that the reason he dissolved the English Defence League was to whitewash the Britain First movement, but that's just speculation on my part. I don't know too much about it. Maybe I'll research it for another video. Maybe I'll research another video on Tommy Robinson, who knows. In the later 2010s, Mr. Yaxley Lennon rose to prominence in international circles that shared his anti-Muslim stance, including in Europe and the United States. In the past week, he has used social media, including a previously banned X profile that was reinstated under Elon Musk, because of course it was. He's also a fucking racist, so why wouldn't he? To promote falsehoods about the identity of the Southport attacker. For anyone who is discounting Tommy Robinson's involvement in these race riots, let me read that to you again. In the past week, he being Tommy Robinson, has used social media, including his previously banned Twitter profile, to promote falsehoods, disinformation about the identity of the Southport attacker. Nowadays, experts say that the English Defence League has evolved into a diffuse idea spread mainly online. Its Islamophobic and xenophobic stances has become an ideal that people self-radicalize themselves into, said Sundar Katwala, the director of British Future, a non-profit that researches public attitudes on immigration and identity. Why is this disorder so hard to quash? Let me throw out an idea before I read what the article has to say. Maybe it's so hard to quash because you won't just call them what they are, which are domestic fucking terrorists. Maybe that's why. That's just my opinion though. Many far-right groups in Britain have deliberately moved away from formal hierarchies and leadership structures, experts say. Joe Mulhall, Hope Not Hate's director of research, called the movement post-organizational in a 2018 analysis. Social media and other technologies, he wrote, offer new ways for it to engage in activism outside the confines of traditional organizational structures. Violent street rallies, a core part of the English Defence League's rise, often serve as a recruiting tool for extremist groups, according to Paul Jackson, a University of Northampton professor who specializes in the history of radicalism and extremism. Social movements thrive on such demonstrations, he wrote in a 2011 paper. They are performances that can reinforce the perceived senses of injustice and being ignored by mainstream voices to followers. The police may also struggle to respond to mobs that can be conjured within hours through private messaging apps. According to Professor Feldman, police are still oftentimes thinking in 20th century terms that something like this might take a few days to set up, that they might ask for a permit for a march. The Southport riot, he said, was very nearly a flash demo. So there are a few final things that I would like to say. The media, in my opinion, are covering these race riots, as I will call them, quite gingerly when you think about how they covered the BLM protests in 2020 or how they covered the pro-Palestinian protests in the last year. Both of those protests were largely peaceful. They weren't marked by violence, even though violence occurred within them to a lesser degree than what we're seeing with these race riots. These anti-immigration protests, these race riots that are occurring across the UK, are largely marked by the violence that they create. These like little gatherings that they put together to go and riot in places, like this is the main part of their protest. So I don't understand why it's so easy to call like BLM protesters or pro-Palestinian protesters violent, unruly, when white supremacists are out on the streets committing violence against minorities and their businesses and their places of worship, and yet they're not called domestic terrorists. No, they're just far-right agitators. Ex-Muslim community. Where are you lot? I know where you are. Under the boot of the likes of Tommy Robinson. Sucking the fart out of the asshole of right-wing freaks. That's where you are. I'm so sick of it. Where the fuck are you? Why aren't you talking about this? This doesn't have anything to do... You know what? During the BLM stuff, which is where I really just started dissociating myself with the ex-Muslim label, during the BLM stuff, I remember a common sentiment was that we don't want to talk about BLM because they don't talk about us. What have they done for us? Why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't you talking about riots that very much affect ex-Muslims, very much affect their families, ex-Muslim people, their families, closeted ex-Muslims, Muslim minorities, hijabis, non-hijabis. This affects them, and yet you're so reticent to talk about that. Why? You have people like Apostate Prophet and Harris Sultan supporting the likes of Tommy Robinson. I watched Apostate Aladdin's live stream with Harris Sultan this morning. What a fucking shit show. What a fucking shit show. You should watch that, by the way. I'll link it in the description of this video. But to close out here, as I hope I've fully discussed these topics, today is the 7th of August, and there have been numerous alerts from the local council as well as local businesses, at least in my area, about the threat that riots pose to our local communities. So I just want to say that you should please stay safe. Please stay vigilant. Please don't be a hero. It's not worth talking to freaks, okay? That They're just going to hate crime you and go. And if you ask me, I don't know about you, I'm not going outside to be hate crimed. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a great day and you stay safe. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next one. My mic decided to die, so I'm testing the audio now. It seems like it's working. All right, hopefully it's recorded this time.